departments, civil rights department. We have a CPED department that deals with housing. We have a police review council that's at the civil rights department. We have a race and equity department that's with the city coordinator's office. Come on, it's time that we really start dissecting how this city has failed some of these and have really failed the Black and brown community. We had three children, more than three, five children, 70 plus children probably have been shot. Come on.
Kathy, let me stop you there. We're going to close this part. Thank you so much for your passion.
Yes,
thank you for the information. Mickey, thank you. I want to keep the program moving. You set it up, in a sense, for the next conversation. I'm going to welcome the mayor of St. Paul, the sister city to Minneapolis, to the program. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane, and we're pleased to have the opportunity to connect with people that are looking for your vote, looking for your support, who are seeking election or re-election to city council, and in this case, the office of mayor of the city of St. Paul, Melvin Carter. Melvin, are you there?
I am. My camera was working backstage. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. We can do, this is radio, and it's also video, but radio works. That's number one. Good afternoon, right, and welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. And I'm sure you heard some of the passion in the conversation we just had with people seeking office in Minneapolis. I wanted to start off, however, with you talking about your candidacy, your city, your success in your current term as mayor of St. Paul, and what you're telling voters as you invite them to support in another term in the November election. Good afternoon, first of all, and thank you for being here, Mr. Mayor.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for having me on. You've been telling the stories of our community for a very long time. I remember being a young person and seeing Insight and, visiting you with my mother back in the day. So I appreciate you continuing to stay in the trenches in the way that you always have, and making sure that our tradition of griot in our community, ensuring our stories are told by us, that's obviously very critical. We've had a tough last couple of years on the planet, in our state, in Minnesota, certainly in St. Paul. We've had a tough last couple of years. And what I'm sharing with our residents is that I'm running for re-election ultimately for two reasons. One, because I'm really proud of all the things that we've been able to accomplish, from raising the minimum wage to eliminating library late fines, to investments we've made in affordable housing, to launching our big, huge partnership to start every child with $50 in a college savings account, to all of the things that we did, from emergency supports for businesses and families to guaranteed income in the pandemic. I'm proud of all those things, one. And two, because it is very clear that our work is not done. We are in this moment right now, which I believe will go down in time as one of those historic moments. I grew up wanting to know where my parents were during Freedom Summer, where my grandparents were after Pearl Harbor, etc. And this is going to be one of those times that our children and our grandchildren will call us to account for what we did right now. The question is on the table, and ultimately we as a city, we as a state, we as a country have got to decide right now whether we're all in this together or whether it's every person for themselves. What we've learned over the last 2 years, my grandfather used to say, who you knew, Al, my grandfather used to say, if experience won't teach you, then nothing will. And what we've learned over the last 2 years, without a shadow of a doubt, is the extent to which the disparities that have plagued Minnesota for far too long are actually dangerous for us all. We've learned that as long as any one of us can't afford a safe home to shelter in place, can't afford to take 2 weeks off to quarantine or care for a sick child, or can't afford to go straight to the doctor when they have symptoms, that we're all worse off. We've learned that when whole parts of our community are concerned about their ability to trust and rely on the men and women who swear an oath to protect and serve our communities, that we're all worse off. And those things demand action. I believe that the work that we started before the pandemic to ensure financial empowerment, to break the disparities in our community, and to build prosperity for all of us, not just sort of a macro prosperity, but a participatory prosperity that every person can participate in. That's the type of work that St. Paul really needs moving forward. And at the end, ultimately, it's not because of me. It's because of all of the St. Paul residents, all the business leaders, all the students, all the workers who have found their voice in City Hall via our administration.
Crime is a major issue around the country,
Yes, it
around
is.
this town. And you, Mayor Carter, your community has been rocked in a major way in the past couple of weeks in two major incidents. Talk about how the community is feeling, number one, and how you are responding to the trauma from the downtown incident a couple of nights ago, and then from 2 weeks ago when known and loved members of the community were found dead in Wisconsin. What's going
That's
on in
right.
St. Paul?
Well, what you just said is absolutely true. Known and loved. I think of when Philando Castile was killed and people were using his name as a hashtag. And we in community who saw him at Golden Time and saw him at JJ Hill, he was, he worked at the school that my children went to kindergarten at, had to figure out how to explain to our children what happened to Mr. Phil. And in the same way, we have experienced the unthinkable in our community. That quadruple homicide that we experienced was just breathtaking, was just heartbreaking. And we're a community that has so few degrees of separation that two of those three families are families that my family goes back decades with, if not generations.
Mm-hmm.
The young woman who was murdered this past weekend in the mass shooting that we experienced in St. Paul went to school with one of our children. And so, while there are some folks I think who want to grab onto this as a hashtag and an opportunity to grind a political axe, the first question is, I appreciate what you asked, is how the community is feeling, because these are our loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because there are some folks who would say, well, this has never happened before. And the truth is, it's been happening for a very long time. My father, one of the stories that shaped who he is losing his cousin and closest friend to gun violence when he was 25 years old. I remember as a child one day where my father came out and said, everybody in the house, and wouldn't let my sisters and I go outside, and we didn't know why, but he had a premonition. And surely enough, one of our older cousins got killed that evening on Selby Avenue. I remember waking up one morning in junior high and trying to figure out what is that hole in the wall above my bed. And so when we have people who have endured this crisis for so long, and then you have folks who come in and try to use our losses, exploit death, exploit pain, exploit trauma to try to make whatever political points they woke up trying to make in the first place. It's disgusting and it's unacceptable. And one of the things that I've committed to our community, Al, is that when I come forward and tell you that this thing we're doing on public safety is different, it's going to be because it's different. That we're not going to rewrap the same old, same old. We've been promised a bill of goods for a generation that said if we just hire more police officers, build bigger jails, and hire tougher prosecutors to fill them, that our neighborhood will be safer. That has not worked for us. I don't know anyone who would argue that's worked for us, which is why we need a much more expansive portfolio. Our approach in St. Paul, which it wasn't built by me, it was built by 2,000 St. Paul residents who have been had their fingerprints on this over the last 4 years. Really has three main components. One is what we call optimal response. That says on an event like what happened on Saturday, there's just no substitute for our police officers, our firefighters, our first responders, our paramedics. They showed up right away. They triaged the scene. They took care of patients. They got people to the hospital. Our police officers had 3 suspects in custody less than 24 hours later. They did exactly what we needed them to do in that moment. But it also recognizes that over half the time when people call 911, it's not because there's any instance of violence or even an emergency or even a criminal act happening. It's because somebody's concerned, somebody's in crisis in community. And when that happens, we owe our community an optimal response for that as well. So that's why we're launching this kind of social worker response portfolio that says we can respond to these instances in ways that do really 2 things. One, help address and resolve hopefully, the cycles that keep people stuck in cycles of violence and crime and calling 911 over and over and over again, while two, helping to free up our officers to focus on the incidents of crime and violence that we all want them focused on anyways. Then beyond that, our goal is to say, how do we make the proactive, data-driven, research-based investments in both individuals and places? There's a lot of research that says people who know what they're going to feed their children tonight, know where they're going to sleep tonight, and are connected to community are statistically speaking less likely to become either an offender or a victim of crime, which is why we have to raise the minimum wage, which is why we're doing guaranteed income, which is why we're doing all the things that we're doing to make sure families are stable. And that places that are well designed, well kept, well maintained, that maintain the sight lines, et cetera, can actually limit opportunities for crime through environmental design. You show me a place that any police chief in America is concerned might be the next site of a violent crime, I'll show you a place that probably hasn't been invested in along those types of lines. So that's the onus and the architecture of this comprehensive, coordinated, and data-driven approach to public safety that we're endeavoring in St. Paul right now.
Let me ask you, Mayor Carter, this is, I'll give you a classic Al McFarlane-ism.
All right.
I say it all the time, but let you deal with it and work with it, because I think you are addressing it, but let me just put it out there. I say that too often, Mr. Mayor, our people get the misery and they get the money. But they can be anybody.
Yep.
But the implication is that our misery ends up being commodified, managed, maintained. Our success, our lack of access, our inability to move beyond the artificial boundaries that constrict and confine us to subpar performance, to lack of equity, ownership, control
That's right.
of our lives and our destiny, somehow is maintained almost
That's right.
as if there is a conspiracy because it's good business to keep us in this position. Now, I may be wrong in saying that, but I throw it out because I think I'm speaking to some of the frustration that people in communities of color feel at the historic deprivation that our cultures have experienced. What are you doing about that? And if the analysis is wrong, just tell me, Al, that you're not in the ballpark with this.
Al, I think your Al McFarlaneism is as close as could be. And this is why I always tell folks my favorite thing about the work that we're doing isn't the what, isn't the policies, isn't the budget items, but it's the how. When I got elected and it was time to choose our cabinet, what did? We didn't create a small exclusive transition team to be the most kind of insidery insiders. What we did was said, listen, we're going to call for 100 members of our community to come and participate in this, what we called our community-based hiring panels. Every single member of my cabinet, which has been lauded in the press as the most diverse cabinet that the city of St. Paul has ever seen, every single member of my cabinet has participated in our community-based hiring panels, where community members source candidates, community members look through resumes, community members do the first round of interviews, and community members send me the list of finalists to look at. We don't have to do that, but it's what we do because we're responsive to community. Far before George Floyd was killed, we are the first city I know of that said, you know what, our police department can't go into a back room and write their own use of force policies. This is a contract. This is a covenant between our officers and our community. It has to be built through a two-way, 2-month conversation. I don't know of any other city that's done that. When we build our budget, whether it's our kind of regular annual budget or whether it's the American Rescue Plan COVID dollars we have access to, we do it through every single year through a public budgeting process. And all I'm saying is this. My first year in office, someone asked me if I wanted fireworks on the 4th of July. And I said, yes, I love the fireworks. And they said, well, it costs us a total of about $100,000. And I said, no, like, what's next? We have other priorities. And 2 weeks after that, we were able to find $100,000 to launch a legal defense fund for immigrant refugees in our community. A member of our progressive community, someone I've worked with and known and revered for a long time, looked at me and said, wait, but isn't that an equity issue? Isn't fireworks an equity issue because Black kids and white kids and rich kids and poor kids and kids in every neighborhood can look up and see the fireworks just the same? And that was instructive to me. I explained to her, no, equity is what happens when we intentionally dismantle disparities. And oftentimes that's actually not the same thing as equality, but more so it says we need a driving definition of what we even mean by equity if we're going to strive to achieve it as a community. And so I go back, and my master's degree is in public policy from the Humphrey School. But when I live in the social justice place, equity seems amorphous, and we're not sure what we mean. We know we want the pictures to be diverse, and we know we want to feel good about what we're doing, but it's hard to kind of put our thumb on exactly what we mean by it. Before that, I did my bachelor's degree in business administration. And in business school and in corporate America, equity has a very clear definition. It's a money word. It means who are the owners. It means who are the decision makers, and it means who gets to participate in an economy. In other words, if I own equity in a company and that company has a good quarter, then I have a good quarter too. And all I'm saying is, if we're going to drive equity, it can't be about me, even as the city's first Black mayor, disappearing in my office and saying, here's what I'm going to do for these other people. It's got to be about self-determination. It's got to be about people being able to participate in the governing process. And that's why we do the work in the way that we do that. This philosophy, by the way, that you just described, draws its roots in the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence says governments are instituted, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. When we think about the Me Too movement, consent has taken on a very specific meaning. It doesn't mean nobody voted against it. It doesn't mean nobody protested. It doesn't mean there were no picket signs outside or any of those types of things. What it means is there was an active and informed and participatory agreement in the work that we're doing moving forward. That's how we build our equity work. And that's at the core, frankly, of why we've been able to do all the things that we've been able to do here in St. Paul. A reporter asked me recently, is it a surprise to me that given all the things we've been through, and it feels like St. Paul has endured some of everything that they can throw at a community, along with Minneapolis, our twin cities, Minnesota has. And they said, is it a surprise to you that the city seems to still feel in line with your vision? And I said, no, it's not a surprise, because it's not my vision at all. It's our vision that we built together.
Mayor Carter, thank you so much for being here. Good luck in your campaign. Thank you. I'm going to switch now to your colleague from across the river, Mayor Jacob Fry.
You mean that really fast guy who ran a marathon in under 3 hours?
Melvin, it's good to see you.
Good to see you as well, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Melvin. We'll see you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mayor Fry, good afternoon. Good to see you.
Good afternoon, Mr. McFarlane. Thanks for having me.
And please call me Al. Thank you for being here. This is a crossroads kind of feeling for our community. A lot of stuff is on the table. People's energy, their feelings, their perceived interests at risk. Sometimes people are angry at their traditional friends and allies. And so this is the environment that you're seeking re-election in. I want to give you a chance to talk to my audiences here on KFAI and on Facebook about your campaign, your vision, your work, and why voters should support you in your bid for re-election. So I'm going to give the microphone to you and thank you. Talk to our listeners.
Well, thank you so much, Al, for having me during some of the most tumultuous and significant events that our city has faced. I've always wanted to be sure to interview with you first, being a strong voice in the Black community and making sure that we're valuing and prioritizing Black press. And certainly this is no different right now. And what I'll tell you is, through 2 years of unprecedented progress, which we saw, everything from record-setting investments in affordable housing, more on a per capita basis than almost any city in the entire country, to major moves around economic inclusion, to 2 years after of unprecedented challenge. I've told the truth. We have charted an honest and principled path forward for the city of Minneapolis. And, has the last 2 years been tough? Absolutely. But this city doesn't quit, and neither do I. One of the things that we've seen again and again, and we hear out on the campaign trail, is that we're getting a great deal of support because of consistency. As mayor, especially when you're leading through a time of great difficulty, you're going to get hit from all different sides. You'll get hit from the far left, from the far right. You'll get hit by activists, business owners, you name it. And that's part of the job. But through all of it, again, we've told the truth and we've remained consistent. And that's part of the reason why our campaign is going so well right now.
Let me ask you to weigh in on three of the ballot initiatives. I'll have people after you bringing different points of view, but I think it's significant to have your take, your voice on the three ballot questions. That's one thing. The second thing is I do want you to take a deep look at how we respond to this national and now local increase in crime and fear for safety. But what about the three ballot questions, first of all, Mr. Mayor?
Well, I think we could probably spend about 45 minutes on each one of those ballot questions, but I'll give you my position as quickly as possible. So on question number one, I'm for it. You just had Mayor Carter on just a minute ago. This proposal would make our system more like St. Paul's system, where you have a clear executive in the mayor that's able to control and run day-to-day activities. You have a clear legislature in the city council that is able to pass laws, do constituent services, do broad engagement, deliberate, and then pass a thoughtful ordinance. And then you have our system, which is confusing. It is gray. It limps along during good times, but during difficult ones, during an emergency or crisis, yeah, it is very problematic. So I do think this is a very important tool to use. You know, so many mayors going all the way back to Hubert Humphrey have said that this particular system needs to be changed, and I think this ballot is a good opportunity to do so. The second question, which is the one regarding policing. Now, there are certain parts of it that I'm very much for. I am for a comprehensive strategy to public safety because not every 911 call requires response from an officer with a gun. We can pair a unique skill set like social workers or mental health responders with the unique circumstances that are happening on the ground. We've invested record amounts in that kind of safety beyond policing work, and we will continue to do so. Importantly, you do not need a charter amendment in order to do those things. You just don't. We can do those things now. I think we should be doing even more. The part and the main reason why I oppose question number two is that it would have the head person of this new department, be it Chief Arredondo or anyone else, report to 14 different people, 13 council members and the mayor. When everyone is in charge, nobody is in charge. And when you have one council member from Ward 3 or 4 or 6 or 8 telling you to do something different from another one from Ward 12 or 1 or 2, inevitably, that's a problem. It's a lack of clarity in terms of direction, and I think it reduces our ability to both hold officers accountable as well as safety in our city. So I'm against that question number two.
Number three?
Number three is a little more complex and nuanced. So I vetoed the first rent control ballot initiative that was moving forward because I'm not for initiative via referendum. I think that elected officials should have the courage to craft policy, listen to experts, listen to data, and then craft a clear policy that works. Now, I vetoed that one. We approved the second, or let it go through anyway. I am for the process that would allow the legislative body and the city council to, again, deliberate, engage with experts, and craft a policy. So I'm for that. We'll be voting yes on question number three. However, given that we haven't seen the policy itself yet, I can't comment on the substance, and I'll reserve that decision for a point in time when we've actually seen the policy itself.
Last two questions, Mayor Fry. A general, what's your message to voters that helps them feel reassured amid the incessant reporting of violence all around us, not only in the places where we usually see it and expect it, but now reaching other people where other people live? What do you mean, Al McFarlane? This is showing up to white people in white neighborhoods and white people downtown in ways that Black people have experienced and have become kind of anesthetized, unfortunately, too. But the trauma now is a trauma that all of us are experiencing differently. What are you telling people, voters, about your intent to support them and their desire, their need, and their right to have safe lives, safe communities? What do you think?
Well, to your point, Al, there is a disproportionate impact of violent crime. About 90% of some of these, the gun violence that we're seeing is happening in about 5 neighborhoods that are predominantly communities of color, and specifically our Black community. And so, I hear all the time, and it's accurate, crime is caused by deep-seated inequities, whether that's housing injustice, food injustice, lack of job security. But crime is also an accelerator of those same inequities. So as mayor, I have an obligation to not just deal with the longer term, to deal with the causes of those deep-seated inequities like housing and economic inclusion. We also have an obligation to deal with the issue right now. Now, unlike some of my opponents, my position has remained exactly the same, which is that we need a both-end approach to public safety. Yes, deep-seated accountability. Yes, a full-on culture shift and safety beyond policing. And we also need police officers. Right now, we have fewer police officers per capita than just about any major city in the entire country. We have around the same number as St. Paul, and they're a dramatically smaller city than we are. And so, yes, in order to properly conduct investigations, in order to make sure we have a gang interdiction unit and we can engage with community members where they're at, you need a properly staffed department. I have pushed for 5 additional recruiting classes in my next budget. I'm hopeful it will pass the city council. And by the way, the officers that we're bringing on, they need to be diverse. They need to be from and for the community. They need to have deep-seated ties with the community they're charged with protecting and serving, whether that's the kid on the street or the small and local business. That is a big part of what we need to push for. That's getting the right officers in and getting the wrong officers out.
Last question, Mayor Fry, your budget, you've just presented a was $1.3 billion budget, a little more than that. Talk about your budget and what are the opportunities that you've discovered even in the midst of the crisis we're experiencing locally and nationally.
I will. We put our money where our mouth is. We talked about affordable housing when I ran for office. And again, we have invested more on a per capita basis than at any time in our city's history and more than almost any city in the entire country. We talked about making sure that we are prioritizing economic inclusion. And so we doubled down in areas like our commercial property development fund, which ensures that our Black business owners don't just own the business, but they can own the underlying real estate. Mayor Carter, I heard him a second ago just talking about equity, ownership. We got to be talking about ownership right now. And if you own the land, then when the value goes up, you don't get the boot because the rents got jacked. You get to reap the benefits from that gain in value. We have a tool that we push for and achieve that is accounting for that. We have investments in everything from public safety to environmental sustainability. But look, here's the thing. I think the big 2 focus areas for these next several years need to be on 2 overarching concepts. One of them is public safety and police accountability. And again, those 2 things are intrinsically linked. They are not mutually exclusive. Mm-hmm. Second is inclusive recovery. We need a strong and inclusive recovery. So we're not just getting back to the old normal. This is not about getting back to the old normal. This is about blowing by the old normal and getting to full transformation in our city and making sure that the precision of our solutions now match the precision of the harm that was initially inflicted. As you know, Al, and you've been doing this a while, there are no magic wand fixes. There are no hashtags or catchphrases that'll suddenly make everything magically better. If there was, then you and Mayor Sharon Sales Belton and mayors before her, et cetera, would have already provided for them. You got to do the hard work. You got to dig down and you got to take a consistent and strong position as to the course that we're ultimately going to chart. And I'll tell you, even through the toughest times, we've done that.
Mayor Jacob Frey, thank you for being here. Good luck in your campaign. Any last comments, or you want to ask people for the vote? Here's your time.
Well, with that, yes, we're running a very strong campaign. We're very proud of the broad-based support that we have, especially from our Black community. And we've developed very deep-seated relationships in areas like the North Side. I'm asking for your vote. I'm asking for your support. But most importantly, we can't stop on election day because we have a whole lot of work to do going forward. And so I'm also asking for your partnership.
Jake, thank you much.
Thank you so much, Al.
We'll see you next time. Okay. I'm Al McFarlane. This Conversations with Al McFarlane. We're winding towards the end. This has been a wonderful 3-hour stretch for our program. Normally on Tuesdays from 1 to 2. This week, a couple extra hours. We're here filling in for our colleague, Lady J, a little under the weather. Hope she's doing well. Pleased to fill in while she's here, and it gives us the opportunity to bring these rich and important voices and issues before you, our friends and neighbors here on KFAI, and those of us who are connected through Facebook Live or other social media platforms. Thanks to our relationship with the Black Press of America, this program is being streamed across a national channel, the Facebook channel of Black Press USA. So we appreciate the relationship we have and the support we have with the national